Welcome to Podnutz Daily for 24 July 2008. First thing I wanted to mention is Mike from the Mike Tech Show. Mike Smith from the Mike Tech Show got with me today, sent me an email. And we have scheduled for August 2nd at 2 p.m. a Philly Tech Guy roundtable we're going to do at Mike's house. So I'm excited about that. You guys need to tune in. We're going to stream it live on Ustream at 2 p.m. on August 2nd. So tune into that if you guys want to check that out. That should be pretty fun. Socket 775. I want to talk about them a little bit. It's a newer kind of processor, it's an Intel processor. And one of the reasons I switched over to, when I built a machine, switched over to AMD processors, for the low-end processors anyway, is because the boxed processors that come with the Intel boards, or Intel chips, the problem that I don't like about them is they have a way of mounting onto the motherboard that basically can take the motherboard and bend it inward because of the pressure. Usually on a processor, there's a metal brace when you put a heatsink on the processor, a metal brace onto the motherboard to keep it rigid. Well, these Intel heat sinks don't have that metal brace. They just jab into the four holes of the motherboard, and if the motherboard is not real rigid, it will bend it upwards. And I think that it decreases the amount of surface that the heatsink covers on the processor. I just don't like it, and I don't like my motherboard being bent like 5 different directions. So I've been using AMDs for my lower end machines because of that reason. I don't want the motherboard to break under the pressure. I could see that happening in the future. In this particular case, somebody brought in a motherboard, their computer, it was overheating on them. So we took a look at it, and it was one of those 775 Intel heat sinks that had come broken off of the motherboard. Another reason why I don't like it. So we did repair that. We bought a new 775 heat sink and fan and mounted it on the motherboard, and we didn't test it. We're going to test that tomorrow. But I just wanted to put my 2 cents in there on my dislike of the heatsink system of the Intel fans that come packaged in the box with the processor. If you bought an Intel processor and bought the fan with it. Had a guy come in today with a computer just riddled with spyware. It had Win Antivirus 2008. It had Ultimate Antivirus 2008. It had Super Antivirus 2008, all kinds of junk just like infesting his machine. Every time you turned it on, you get like 10 pop-up windows. He needed it in a rush too, so we did a quick cleanup on it. Went into the safe mode, and we ran Smith Fraud Fix. Download the latest version of Smith Fraud Fix. CCleaner and Dial-A-Fix just to clean up the temporary files and whatever Windows, any like DLLs or files like that could be corrupted. The main thing we did, though, was ran Super AntiSpyware. And this computer wouldn't allow us to load it in safe mode. We had to go into normal mode to actually run it, or to install it. Then we went back to safe mode and ran it. The thing is, we ran a quick scan with Super AntiSpyware, and it did not find much. We ran the complete scan, the full scan. It found all those Win Antivirus 2008 and all that junk and removed it. Now, the complete scan, since he was in a rush, I was like, I hope the quick scan works because the complete scan might take hours. Well, if you run CCleaner first and you clean up all the temporary files, and you run Smith Fraud Fix, which does a disk cleanup, and just get rid of all the junky files, temporary internet files and whatnot, then your scans are going to go a lot faster. The Super Anti-Spyware scan only took half an hour, and it found everything. So now we know you can get that scan done fairly quickly. Just got to wipe out all the bad temporary files before that. Had a laptop come in. Now, the customer said that he would plug in his power jack. This was a Dell 5150 Inspiron. He'd plug in his AC adapter into the jack, and it would run for a while, and then it would stop. And what kept happening was the time that he would plug it in and the time that it stopped just got less and less and less, up to the point where he'd plug in his power adapter and the Dell wouldn't go on at all. Now, he thought he had a bad power adapter. It wasn't feeding the computer enough power. So he bought a new power adapter, hooked that up, same problem. I just realized I was not I just realized I didn't hit record on Ustream, so the audio is going to be recorded, but the video is not being recorded. So you're just going to get the second half of the podcast if you decide to watch it. Or for those of you who just hit this recording, I forgot to record the first half. But anyway, he bought a new power adapter, plugged it into the Dell, and it still was getting no power. So he thought the power jack was bad. That's fine, valid. Could be. Has the symptoms of not receiving no power. Anyway, he brought the computer into me, and I can usually tell from looking at the outside of a power jack if it is bad. I mean, you can tell just because if it's not loose and it feels pretty tight, it's probably making a connection. So if the jack looks okay from the outside, what I'd like to do is just check the voltage coming out of the power adapters, make sure the power adapter's working. Checked out the power adapter, it worked. The voltage was fine. So I said, all right, well, there might be something internal that I can't see from the outside that's causing this not to attach to the motherboard. So I took the whole thing apart and looked at the motherboard, tested all the leads from the power jack to the motherboard, and everything was fine. I plugged the power adapter into the motherboard while everything was taken apart just to see if the power was getting to the motherboard, and it certainly was. What I did notice was, and these 5150 Dells are famous for this, and that particular body style, I think the Inspiron 1100 and 1150 is the same way. The 5100s are the same way. A dust buildup builds inside the inside of the fan and builds a wall of dust over the heatsink. So the fan is spinning, but it's not letting any of the air that the fan is spinning out of the computer because there's a wall of dust. If you keep running your computer that way, it's going to overheat. If you keep running your computer to the point where it overheats, it's going to damage either the processor or the motherboard. I switched out the processor. Maybe that was bad. Still, the computer didn't power on. So what I did is I had the bare bones motherboard just laying on my bench, plugged in the power adapter, hit the power button, and still nothing. So his motherboard is basically fried. So I looked for any capacitors that may have blown on the motherboard, didn't find any. So when I can't find any capacitors on the motherboard and the motherboard looks physically okay, yet I know it's the motherboard, then I don't try to repair the motherboard, I just order a new one. So I went on eBay. It looks like he's going to pay about $150 for a motherboard. When I hear back from him, we'll see what he wants to do. But as I had the motherboard sitting on my bench, I had the hard drive was disconnected, the memory was out, the wireless card was disconnected. Everything I took off the motherboard. And then I always try it without the memory. Some motherboards won't power up unless you put the memory in. So I put one stick of RAM in to test the motherboard. And I know that it's just so bare bones right now that if something is going wrong, it's got to be the motherboard. So that's what it was. I think that's about it for computers we worked on today. I contacted Scott Meuler from the book, I think it's Upgrading and Repairing PCs or Repairing